We've been rolling dice and playing with colour. We've been playing Spectrum by Bombard Games.
Hi, I'm Libby, this is Julian, and we've been sent this prototype, Spectrum, a game of colours by Bombard Games that we've had a little look at and a play to tell you all about today. So, Julian, how do you play the game?
Well, Spectrum, a game of colours is an abstract strategy board game by Joe Devlin and published by Bombard Games. This 1 to 6 player game is a race to move pawns from the outside of the board towards the centre. Players can move up to 2 spaces in a direction determined by dice. The sides of each dice show a primary colour: red, orange, yellow, green, blue and purple. On a turn, a player rolls an increasing number of dice and chooses 2 from the pool. There are 3 basic rolls that can happen in the Spectrum. The most common is when you roll 2 primary colours that are not next to each other on the board. In this case, you can move 2 spaces in one of the rolled colours or 1 space in each, completing your 2 movement allowance. The second roll in Spectrum is when you roll 2 primary colours that are next to each other, albeit separated by an intermediate colour. You have the same options as before, but now you can move into, out of, and through the shade that's between them. The third type of roll is a special roll, when a player rolls 2 of the same colour on the dice. Here you must take your allotted 2 movements in the colour you've rolled, using both movement points to move just 1 pawn. But then the bonus is that the player also gets 2 more movement points, either in the colour they've rolled or in the colour that's on the bottom of the dice. This second move can also be done in associated intermediate colours. But it's not just doubles that are special. As you unlock more dice later into the game, you can roll triples or even quadruples, which offer even greater bonuses. To add even more depth, players can use 1 movement point to capture a pawn on the board by landing directly on it. Or they can use 2 movement points to leap over a pawn already on the board. For normal movement, you can only move to a space that's touching the side of the space you're on. But jumping allows you to calculate where you can move to based on the vertices between the spaces, allowing you to move further. When you make a movement that lands you exactly on the gold star in the centre of the board, you've secured that colour, and opponents can't capture your pawn when you're on a star. When players have collectively unlocked 4 stars, everyone adds an extra dice to their dice pool, with a 4th dice added when you've unlocked the 8th star. Then, according to the amount of players, once one player has secured enough gold stars, they win the game. Also available are 12-sided Spectrum dice and a deck of Spectrum cards, which can be used to add greater variety to the game. These unlock new ways to play, including solo possibilities and modes that are more strategic and less random. Spectrum Deluxe also comes with a double-sided board for colourblind accessibility. Using this additional board, along with the custom Spectrum dice, players who are colourblind can still experience and play Spectrum, a game of colours, with minimal issues. Spectrum is a non-linear, non-numerical roll and move game. It modernises familiar mechanisms by increasing the amount of tactical decisions each roll offers.
Of course, as usual, everything you've seen in the footage so far is a prototype, so we don't know exactly how things will be finalised in terms of components and exact shading, colours, size of box I think might change, and cards and bits and pieces. And we are talking today about the sort of base element of the game more particularly. You've seen from Julian's overview that there is something to do with colourblind die. We haven't had a chance to try those from this prototype, although we would be interested because you do struggle with some colours, so it'd be interesting to see how that does work. But it's nice that that sort of element is in there, isn't it? But we are talking about the sort of base element of the game as it is today, rather than the additional decks and things like that. So let's get into our 5 reasons. Why do we think that you might be interested in this game?
Now, families across the country are used to those normal games where you're rolling dice and you're making an action depending on what those dice is. You see that kind of mechanic in Snakes and Ladders and Ludo, and even in things like backgammon. Now, what Spectrum, a game of colours, does really well is take those familiar mechanisms and then adds a kind of more modern twist. So although you are still rolling dice, the ways you use those dice can vary between player to player, which kind of elevates it above those normal family favourites. What is also good is it's accessible for families, yet there are additional rules you can add into the game to kind of make it slightly trickier once you've got the grasp of the rules. And the rules themselves are quite simple. It doesn't take long to understand the basic concepts of the game and then get a game going. So I think this is a fantastic game for families to play together, a bit different to what the normal things families do tend to play, yet has scope that it can be then taken further and you can expand upon the base game to then feel a bit more varied, a bit more exciting. And that's achieved by the deck of cards that will come with the game and also the additional optional rules that you can throw in there.
Yeah, a little step up for them. One of the things that does step this game up from those traditional games that Julian spoke about, that every family has got somewhere in a cupboard, is the way that the game evolves during play. Now you're starting with 10 of these tokens to sort of place around, and you only have 2 dice to start with in terms of the colours that you can move, but obviously no one's gone anywhere at the beginning of the game, so pretty much anything that you roll you can do something. You can capture other players' tokens and you can always place something out, and as the game progresses things get a bit tighter because stars are taken up. You don't need a whole swath of sections of colours and you're not rolling the right things, but that's when these extra dice come in, which give you more options, which allow for more special moves because you've got more chances of rolling doubles or even triples or 2 doubles and things that give you these special moves. But you need them because everything's tightened up a little bit, and by that point potentially you've got all 10 of your markers taken up on the board or already on stars, that you don't necessarily have that option to sort of capture like you did at the beginning of the game with your opponents and sort of jump up and take over, or even to sort of reposition and start again on another track because you've got somewhere that's now lost the race for that colour and is now needing to sort of sidestep across. And you kind of think, oh, wouldn't it be easier to sort of start again somewhere else? So the way that moves and evolves is something that really steps this game up from the basic traditional roll and moves.
Now, family weight games need to be very quick to play. People lose interest if they're playing for too long. But thankfully, Spectrum, a game of colours, is exactly that. You can get it from the shelf and play a game back in the box within sort of half an hour, which means that people will be engaged for the entire time. And also what's quite good, it can be used as maybe a filler game at the end of a game night where you can play a game, feel like you've played something substantial, but it's not going to take a long stretch of time out of your day.
One of the really interesting elements of this game is the middle colours. You have on the board what they call the primary colours, and I'm not meaning primary colours as we know, though I'm meaning the colours that are starred on the boards, which are also the colours that you roll on the dice. But in between each of those colours is a colour that would blend to share. So in order to get up those tracks, you're needing to roll one from each side to be able to move on to this middling section. So inevitably they're the ones that are contended at the end of the game. They're the tight ones that you're racing for. But here's the quandary, because if you roll those 2 colours and blend, you're putting your pawn over into that middling colour range. Technically it's safer from your opponent. If it's early doors in the game, you're much less likely to have your pawn captured. But then also your chances of rolling those 2 colours again are that little bit less, because you have to roll the blend in order to move up on that blend, or there are a couple of little ways that you can do that, but you do have that decision of, do I move it to technically safer ground but then with the less chance of being able to move it again, or do I try and race up the primary colour and then sidestep later, but then I might get caught on my way up, and that sort of race for those middling colours is where the game is. That's where the game is won and lost. And so that is what gives it that little something special. That's something different as well from your standard kind of traditional older style roll and move games.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of hidden depth in this game that on the surface you don't immediately notice, but as you start playing it, you start realising that's the juicy part, that's the exciting part of the game.
And if you are playing with younger kids, I do think the fact that you've got the colour wheel there and that spectrum and learning how those dice blend to those middling colours is quite nice for them educationally as well, to really understand the art of colour.
And Spectrum, a Game of Colours, is a fantastic way of exploring that art of colour. Obviously it's an abstract game, which means it's going to be welcoming to everyone. No one's going to be kind of put off by a theme that they find quite alienating. And as you look at that colour wheel, you see a game that doesn't look like many other games.
Yeah, it's so visually attractive, this game. That spectrum of colours, that colour wheel takes up the entire board, and you've got this gorgeous rainbow to look at all through your gameplay. So if you're interested in a little step up from the traditional roll and move games, and you think that this wonderfully attractive abstract game might be for you, perhaps you can look into it a little further.
Yeah, all the links you need to find out more about this are in the description. And if this is the first time you've seen us, we are BoxedMeeples. We post a video on YouTube at least twice a week, always about board games. So if that's your kind of thing, do consider subscribing. And if you're interested in this game and you want to ask us any questions, please also put something in the comments below and like the video if you haven't already.
Yeah, we would love to hear from you.
But as always, thank you so much for watching.
Bye.